Chapter 2290, For the Value of Life 1. Yang Xinxin didn't hesitate at all, but looked at Zhang Yi with admiration. Of course that's fine, brother. You're right. She continued, humans, especially those who have not experienced the torture of society, are simple and pure. Their essence is also the purest. This is certainly a better extraction material than the centipede. If you have such plans, brother, we need to build a large-scale testing ground. We can mass-produce human embryos and then cultivate them until they have mature spiritual essence. During this process, we need to add a screening step. Only individuals with strong spiritual power will be cultivated. This will save a lot of resources. Yang Xinxin's tone was flat, and it sounded like they were discussing raising chickens. Lu Karen couldn't help but hug his arms. Isn't it a little too evil? I can't stand thinking about that scene. Yang Xinxin lowered her eyes and said calmly, if you see through the essence of life, that it is just an etheric aggregate controlled by the Creator, a part of the collective unconscious, then you won't find it cruel. Zhang Yi thought of the gate of eternal destruction in the southwest region and the spear of Longinus forged with the lives of countless creatures under the eye of the devil, and suddenly felt that the meaning and value of life were difficult to measure accurately. Sometimes life can be quantified. Especially when the entire group may be extinct, the value of the individual is not so high. Zhang Yi thought for a moment and said, I just think this matter is worth studying. He looked at Zhou Kuer and Yang Xinxin and said, Kuer, you are an expert in the field of biological sciences. You and Xinxin can do an experiment and study this matter when you have time. If it works, maybe we can find a shortcut to human evolution. This may sound a bit exaggerated. After all, the many powerful people who appear in the world today are the result of a mass extinction of species and the return and release of a super-ancient god-level civilization. The release of life energy equivalent to tens of billions of levels has led to the birth of mutated super-individuals among humans and a large number of underground civilizations. Zhang Yi even came up with a bold idea. If the ether fragments appear after the fusion of reproductive cells, then we can easily obtain tens of billions, hundreds of billions, or even trillions of ether fragments. This is just a joke, of course. But Zhang Yi's words have expressed his attitude that the experiment must be done. Lu Karen spread his hands and said, Brother, just do it if you want to. She suddenly rolled her eyes and said, Well, even if we don't do it, maybe others are already doing it. This sentence made Zhou Kuer frown immediately, and Zhang Yi's eyes became deep. That's exactly what I'm worried about. After the end of the world, humans will do anything to become stronger and to ensure that their race can survive the crisis of mass extinction. As long as there is a possibility of becoming stronger, there will be plenty of people willing to do it, even if it means eating excrement. Zhou Kuer took a deep breath and said, I understand. Leave this matter to me. Zhang Yi walked down from the throne, came to Zhou Kuer, and held her in his arms. Only Zhou Kuer could do this because she is a doctor and has a relatively strong tolerance for such cruel and even somewhat inhumane experiments. Don't force yourself. If you insist on doing something inhumane, then stop. Zhou Kuer nodded. The key point that needs to be confirmed is whether the embryo develops self-awareness at the time when the etheric fragments descend from the higher dimensions. If at that time it was still in its early stages and could not be considered human from a biological perspective, I think there would be nothing wrong with that. Zhang Yi nodded. Anyway, let's try it. We have plenty of resources to use now. If successful, it would be equivalent to converting the resources of the material world into ether fragments. There was a strange light in Yang Xinxin's eyes, but she didn't say another word. Because the definition of life varies from person to person. Perhaps when the ether fragments are injected into the embryo, consciousness is born. No one knows what the outcome will be. But Yang Xinxin has made up her mind that once she finds that this path is feasible, she will definitely do it. Zhang Yi simply arranged the finishing work for the people around him, and all he had to do next was wait. Waiting for the battlefield to be cleaned up. However, during this process, he still went out for a while. Because in the underground world, not everyone is one of us, there are also outsiders. He was referring, of course, to the pair from the Natural Sciences Society in Colombia. Liu Karen has completely taken control of the Iron Curtain of the sky, and everything in the entire Wulwan Empire is under her control. Zhang Yi directly locked their location. Professor Da Vinci and Brian arrived at the Imperial Academy of Sciences and Ancient Documents Archives shortly after the battle. Like Zhang Yi, they are very interested in the technology and history of this country. When Zhang Yi arrived here, two people were looking through materials in the huge archive. Although some ancient books have been preserved, high-tech civilization will naturally not rely on books that are easily damaged, so all data has become data. Professor Da Vinci came to the center of the archives and began to download the information of the entire database very skillfully. Oh my god! The data here is so huge that the storage device I brought can't hold it all. Well, I'm not very interested in their modern civilization. Let's start downloading from ancient history. Professor Da Vinci was busy when Zhang Yi walked in from outside. Yo, are you busy? He smiled and raised his hand in greeting. Brian pricked up his ears, smiled affectionately, and raised his paw. Chaos, you're back. It came to Zhang Yi, took a look at Zhang Yi, and found that although there was a smell of blood on Zhang Yi's body, it all came from the lizard man. It said in surprise, "Oh, damn. You killed that big lizard man and didn't get hurt at all. Damn Chaos. You are a genius." Professor Da Vinci said, "If absolute defense causes injury, it will definitely not be a minor injury, and it may mean failure. So his battle won't be easy, am I right?" Zhang Yi nodded. "That's true. I fought him for quite a while, consuming a huge amount of resources. But fortunately, the outcome is always good." Chapter 2295 The Value of Life 2. Zhang Yi did not stop Professor Da Vinci's actions. Let him get this information. These were the prices promised to them and their dog. Da Vinci was not interested in those strategic resources. He was not Zhang Yi and could not take away so many strategic materials. He just likes fun stuff. Professor Da Vinci, Brian, thank you very much for coming to help this time. But I'm wondering if coming here to help us fight the war without permission will cause you any trouble after you return to Colombia. Zhang Yi said with a kind smile. Leonardo da Vinci took out an ancient manuscript from a glass cabinet nearby and put on a green monocle. He quickly scanned and collected the information above, but it was very troublesome to decipher the text. After all, he is not Yang Xinshin, who can directly control the brains of the lizard people and make them provide him with text data. But with his ability, he can still translate them after returning. He said indifferently, "That doesn't happen. We are simply cooperating with the Colombian government. Apart from meeting their demands, we are independent and free. As long as it doesn't harm Colombia's interests, anything is fine." Zhang Yi crossed his arms and smiled faintly. "We are very similar in this respect." However, he looked at the man and the dog, a strange flash in his eyes. "Since you are mercenaries, would you consider working for me? If you stay with me, you'll have more opportunities to encounter the extraordinary world, right?" Zhang Yi began to think about recruiting them. After all, this is a bishop-level alien dog and a weird scientist with a top-notch brain. "We don't work for anyone. That would be really boring," Professor Da Vinci said coldly. "However, if you find such an interesting place next time, you can call us over again." When he said this, an excited smile appeared on his face. Obviously, he gained a lot from this operation. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows. Although he felt a little regretful, he could understand. Then the relationship between you and the Tong organization is also. Of course. We only exist for mutual benefit. In addition to the agreement, the president of the Hitomi organization can ask us to take action when necessary if they pay sufficient compensation. Outside of this situation, no one can force us to do anything. Those guys in the Tong organization are just a bunch of pitiful people who knew the end of the world was coming and huddled together to survive. Woof. Did you forget I'm still here when you said that? Brian clearly expressed his dissatisfaction. You were too lazy to join in the beginning, so you pushed me out. Professor Da Vinci rolled his eyes in disdain. But you've been eating a lot of the dog food people give you, haven't you? This is about intellectuals. How can you say that? I just can't bear to reject their kindness. Zhang Yi looked at the bickering man and dog and felt that they looked particularly heartwarming. A lonely old man who is like a Frankenstein, and a dog that seems to be unruly but is actually very loyal. It really is a great combination. He smiled faintly. According to our agreement, you can conduct any investigation here. Besides this, is there anything else you need? Weapons, energy, biological samples, I will provide you with all of these. Professor Da Vinci glanced at Zhang Yi and asked, are you trying to say that you hope we return to Colombia and keep our mouths shut about what's happening here? Zhang Yi smiled faintly. If you can keep it a secret, that would be best. But it's your freedom. If you really want to tell others, I understand. Zhang Yi hoped that the news of the destruction of the Wulwan Empire would be spread as late as possible. But this is not a threat. It is a request to a friend. Zhang Yi has always respected those who helped him. This is the basic bottom line of being a human being. He can fight with others for interests and be ruthless. But he would never betray his friends. Click. Professor Da Vinci closed the ancient book in his hand. The old book, which had been repaired countless times, still shed some ashes. If you can give me some biological samples of the gatekeeper of the underworld, I swear that I will never reveal anything I saw here today to anyone. Professor Da Vinci stared at Zhang Yi, his eyes narrowed, but he spoke very seriously. Exchange a promise for a precious biological sample of a night-level mutant. Belief or not, all depends on the respect between the two parties and their principles. Zhang Yi lowered his head and pondered for half a second, then quickly raised his head and said with a smile, okay, deal. The two people held hands together, and a hint of tenderness appeared in Professor Da Vinci's dead eyes that had never changed for thousands of years. Being trusted by others, especially by someone with extremely powerful strength, is also something to be proud of. Zhang Yi immediately took some of Zheng Lu's body fragments, put them in a box, and handed it to Da Vinci. Then we'll be here for about another week. Have fun. After Zhang Yi finished speaking, he waved his hand, opened the dimensional door, and left. Leonardo da Vinci looked at the Zhenglu biological sample in his hand and could not hide the joy in his eyes. Brian came over curiously and said in disbelief, that guy actually gave you such a precious thing. Professor Da Vinci said, he is a very smart person. Because smart people understand that being honest with each other is the most efficient way. But this kind of honesty can only be practiced between intelligent people. There will always be some foolish people who think that lies and betrayal are a sign that they are smarter than others. Zhang Yi no longer needed to do anything at this time, because Yang Xinxin had arranged everything. The assets of the Wulwan Empire are too huge. In addition to most of the strategic resources collected by Zhang Yi, there are also some other extremely valuable materials. For example, the technologies in the Scientific Research Experimental Center. Even though the technological level of the Wulwan Empire is not as high as that of the Songyuan clan, they still have their own strengths, especially in the field of biotechnology. As for the armor of the end seized by Yang Xinxin, it seems that it needs to pass DNA verification before it can be activated, and it needs to be controlled by someone of pure royal blood. But in Liu Karen's hands, this problem is no longer a problem. After Liu Karen took over the Iron Curtain, this country completely became Zhang Yi's possession. Chapter 2296, The Value of Life 3. Only at this time did Zhang Yi take out the remaining one-third of Marshal Zheng Lu's essence. Less than 1/10 of it is separated and stored in an energy storage tank. He absorbed the rest directly into his body. In an instant, a huge amount of energy surged into his body, making him feel like his head was about to explode. A torrent of energy surged into his body, and this part of energy was actually higher than the total spiritual power he possessed. Ethnic groups and special abilities are all constructed in the form of a pyramid. The higher you go, the fewer there are, and the stronger they are. The spiritual power required to span from 40,000 points to 50,000 points is an extremely terrifying number. Even Marshal Zheng Lu took advantage of the end of the world in the human world to capture a large amount of spiritual power that escaped after the death of humans, and then gathered the power of the entire country to be promoted to the White Knight. Therefore, this almost one-third of the original power is already very terrifying for Zhang Yi. Fortunately, Zhang Yi has now been baptized by the spiritual ocean of Tianyu Palace. His spiritual body has been sublimated to the extreme, the bottleneck on the road to upgrading has been opened, and the speed of absorbing external forces has been greatly improved. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, it would take several years to absorb this one-third of the power before it could be completely transformed into one's own power. Even so, it would take him a long time to integrate this power. However, this brief impact has already increased his ability index by at least 2,000 points. It took Zhang Yi a long time to slowly open his eyes. After his life dimension was elevated, he felt that his understanding of the world had undergone a significant change. He rubbed his neck. At this rate, my strength can be raised to 45,000 points in half a year at most. Looking around the world, there are almost no humans who can threaten my life. Even if it's a powerful being from a super ancient civilization, it would be hard for anyone to take my life unless a monster of Bai Longzi's level appears. Zhang Yi nodded, very satisfied with his current situation. After he became powerful, the first thing he thought of was not to seek revenge on anyone or plunder some resources. Instead, I was thinking that I could live a stable life for a long time. When Zhang Yi was thinking about this, he suddenly heard a chirp sound in his ears, like a little mouse making trouble in the corner. Zhang Yi was stunned for a moment. Then, he thought of who it was. He smiled and looked toward the corner of the palace. "Big Totoro, you're back?" In the corner of the palace, a thick piece of floor was lifted up, and a huge, cute creature crawled out from the ground. The big chinchilla was dirty, but its eyes were shining as it crawled out from the ground. That's not all. After it crawled out, a large group of burrowing beasts that looked similar to the giant chinchilla, but of different sizes, followed it out one after another, and soon filled the entire palace. Chirp, chirp. The big Totoro danced in front of a group of younger brothers. Then they came to Zhang Yi, knelt down in unison, and bowed their heads. Through the translation device, the big chinchilla can already communicate with people in a simple way. It looked like it was seeking credit and was very proud. "Master, how did my mission go?" Zhang Yi smiled and nodded, then walked over and patted its fat body hard, which immediately splashed a large amount of dust. Cough, cough, cough. "Well done." Cough, cough, cough. The big Totoro blinked, then shook its body hard to shake off the dust. After digging underground for a long time, it just looked dirty. The burrowing beast is truly a natural-born mining beast. Although its combat power is not very good, its digging ability is truly first class. The structure of the palace was very solid and used top-notch materials, but it was still broken through. In this war, the contribution made by the big Totoro is not small at all. To be frank, it is even greater than that of some Epsilon-level mutants. Because it is actually an indigenous animal, it and its brothers are very familiar with the terrain of the Olyuan Empire. With them, the underground energy transmission pipelines and communication equipment lines of the Wulwan Empire were destroyed, giving the coalition forces a huge advantage. Zhang Yi stroked the big chinchilla's head, thinking about how to reward this cute guy. Now the big chinchilla's ability index has reached 9,999 points. After all, it usually eats centipedes as spicy snacks. Zhang Yi said, "From now on, I will appoint you as the captain of the engineering corps, and all these diggers will be under your charge." As he spoke, Zhang Yi took out a gold medal from the alien space and stuffed it into the big Totoro's hand. The big chinchilla blinked its eyes, felt the heavy, shiny gold in its hands, and chirped happily. The digging beasts behind it also gathered around to congratulate it. Zhang Yi touched his nose. It wasn't that he was trying to fool a fool, but for the time being, he had no idea what the big Totoro needed. On weekdays, he had nothing to say to this lovely big pet and gave it everything he could. In this way, the Wulwan Empire still needed a long period of cleansing, and nothing else happened. Zhang Yi planned to collect all the useful things and then seal up this place, saving it for future use. Maybe it's a temporary shelter. The sky is of useless and dying stars. At this time, it was night in Europe, and a full moon was hanging high in the sky, which was the middle of the month. The silent and cold world does not affect the waxing and waning of the moon. But in a hidden place somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, a place that is difficult for ordinary people to find, and even if they accidentally enter it, they will miss it. There is a beautiful island. No matter how cold it is outside or howling the wind and snow are, it is a brilliant autumn here. In October 2054, in the autumn, the forest was filled with giant French plane trees. Each tree was so tall that it took 3 people to hug it. The red fallen leaves on the ground made this place as dreamy as a fairy tale world. This is where Charles Louis Montesquieu, the president of the Hitomi organization, lives. In the woods, there is an ancient European-style villa. Montesquieu, wearing a flannel coat, was standing at the windowsill, looking at the sky with a high-powered telescope. This was manufactured 5 years ago by Iris, the world's best astronomical telescope manufacturer, and each one is worth 500,000 euros. Using it, you can really see the craters on the surface of the moon clearly. Your Majesty, Muad'Dib Blood stood respectfully behind him. Montesquieu stared at the full moon in the sky, which was as bright as a white jade plate, beautiful and intoxicating. But there was no expression of joy on Montesquieu's face. Instead, he looked depressed, with deep wrinkles on his face. The situation is worse than I imagined. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all.